Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the NRG series here in Chicago. I'm your host, Ben Shark, with my co-host, Devin O'Donnell, better known as Doomwake. And this is our last round for the year when it comes to commentary of the main events. And we've got a doozy for you. We have Andrew Elenbogen. He is in our feature match area versus Casey Ryback in a very exciting Enchanties versus Phoenix matchup with a lot on the line. But first, let's take a look at our yearly leaderboard, because Devin and I did some math, and we have some kind of exciting news we wanted to share with everyone.
Yeah, so I mean, my math, I've been known to be wrong before because math is not my strong suit. But with Connor and Cliff both dropping from the main event, we believe, without 100% confirmation, but about 99% confirmation, that Garrick Alford has locked the year-long MVP award. So, big congratulations to Garrick Alford. That is going to be a huge achievement because it's not only going to give him free entry into all of our events for 2025, but it's also going to give him a bit of an edge in the Players' Championship. Mason, talk to us about that.
Yeah, so our MVP, they get to block one person from playing them on day one. We're going to do some Swiss event. We'll cover that more in detail December 14th and the 15th. Follow us on Twitch right now so you don't miss that. $35,000 on the line, along with a Pro Tour invite and an invite back to next year's champs. You get to run it all back again, see if you can, back-to-back it. But a lot on the line there, and getting to block someone is so important. You look at the deck list, maybe you're playing something like Control, right? And someone else, let's say, brings a tempo deck that looks very strong against you. Well, you block them. Now you're not playing against them, and that gives you sort of this small edge. And it's very exciting. We'll go into that more detail when that comes. But we also have some other players locked. So Connor Mullally is going to be locked for our year event. Connor and Cliff Boyardee were our two up here. They both had bad days today, but no one can catch them. No one can pass them, so they're a hard lock when it comes to our yearly leaderboard. Under that same lines, Zoe Riederman also locked through a very weird series of events. Basically, people could technically pass Zoe here on this leaderboard, but if they do, they can't pass Zoe on the seasonal leaderboard. So Zoe is just a lock, basically. It's really just a matter of how she gets the invite from having such a strong performance here in Season 2 and yearly. So congratulations to Connor Mullally, Cliff Boyardee, and Zoe Riederman. We're going to be seeing all three of you in our championship at the end of the year. But this does open up some weirdness, because remember how I just said that, Devin? You were pointing out how Zoe's a lock either way. But if Zoe locks it by, let's say, winning today on the championship, right? And she wins our event at X and 1, very likely to happen. She's done it before in Pioneer. She did it last year in our last event of the year. Actually, she won that tournament. She could do it again today. That's going to open the door. Ryan Bellamy's will actually be next in line. And everyone who can catch Ryan, and only one person is Fletcher Johnson. Bellamy's is not here today, but he might still sneak into our event. We're going to have to see how that all plays out. Very exciting here still with the last couple rounds of this event for the year.
Yeah, and you mentioned Fletcher Johnson is a name that we want to talk about too, if we can take a look at the Season 2 leaderboard, because, Fletcher has a chance to maybe catch up on the yearly leaderboard, but with looking at Season 2, Fletcher in a comfortable 85 points. Again, Fletcher and Cliff have, I believe, Fletcher, I think, is 2-2, so still battling it out. Cliff has confirmed dropped, but we see here, Zoe Riederman, if she wins today, that gets her to 91 points. That jumps both Cliff and Fletcher. Then, that would still, she would be qualified, so that would still pass down to Fletcher and Cliff that way. But there's also, now that you see Cliff's name here, there's also similar pass down things where, if Cliff is, in this, in the top 2 in this leaderboard and the top 3 in the other leaderboard, then maybe that opens up the door for an Andrew Elenbogen to potentially sneak in here, who we may or may not have in our feature match this round.
That's right. And if Elenbogen wins as well, right? Let's say Elenbogen versus Zoe in the finals, then we're passing down to Christian Valenti, because Connor Mullally, like we mentioned, is dropped. Now, for Christian, I don't know if he knows what's going on with the leaderboard race. He is 1-3, I believe, after this round, which implies to me he's still playing, right? If he was, a lot of people would drop at 1-2. So we're going to have to see if he can keep it up. But he might be in a weird position where he literally is our last person in via sneaking, which is so funny because Ryan Bellamy's and Christian Valenti are good, close personal friends who live very close to each other, and they're both trying to sneak in. So these Kentucky boys are trying to come into our tournament at the last minute. We'll have to see how that goes. I do believe we're probably ready in the feature match area, so let's head on down to that as we have Casey Ryback on your left here playing 4-color enchantments versus Andrew Elenbogen on your right playing Is It Phoenix. Of note with Casey's Ryback deck, this is not enigmatic. incarnation. This is like the 4 of all the overlords for Zur the Enchanter Beanstalk deck. This is very much a control deck.
Right. You mentioned this is, we've seen a lot of enchantments deck in the past. We've seen, versions that have had enigmatic incarnation, some with 60, some with 80, some with Fires of Invention, some without. But this is sort of just the evolution of the enchantments deck. If we can maybe pop up Zur Eternal Schemer on the screen, because that might be one that you are not familiar with, but a very, very powerful card, especially when combined with these overlords, because you can cast the overlord for its impending cost. And then if you play Zur the Eternal Schemer, you can then animate the Overlord, which would still give you the attack trigger, and it would give you a very giant Death Touch lifelink hexproof creature. And another interesting thing about this deck is not only do the Overlords work well with Zur, they also happen to all trigger up the Beanstalk. So a lot of underlying synergies with this Zur deck, as it were.
Yeah, it's incredibly powerful. I actually played the enigmatic deck at the RC just a couple months ago, and I was very impressed by what was going on. It never occurred to me to just be like, what if I just only played Overlords and Zur? Maybe a learning moment for me there, and it has been quite powerful. Speaking of powerful, Free the Fae here for Andrew Elenbogen, triggering the artist talent. It's going to take a second to figure out exactly what he wants to rummage away. It's going to do the Fiery Impulse, resolve the Free to the Fae, has a Consider as the option, and it picks up another Picklock. Prankster could run it back here, decides to take Consider for the 1 mana.
Yeah, we saw Elenbogen in the feature match previously playing this more artist talent focused Is It Phoenix deck. Elenbogen still does have a couple of copies of Ledger Shredder, which is not something that all the Phoenix players are sporting, but the 2 shredders for artist talent, and then the 1 copy of Prof's Eidetic Memory. So yeah, we'll have to see how this matchup plays out. Casey definitely ahead here. Is tapping 5 mana, but Elenbogen only has 2 mana with that artist talent. And it looks like Elenbogen might have missed the land drop,
He
right? Because we played
did.
the talent on 2 and the prankster on 3. So yeah, even falling further behind here.
Yep, this everywhere token is going to be big for Casey. And, and there's untapped because of Spelunking. And, this body is 6/5, nothing to laugh at. Now, it can get lightning axed, right? Which is, unfortunate. But if Andrew doesn't have that or has to spend his time looking for land and setting up, Casey is very quickly going to start putting the pressure on Andrew here.
Yeah, you see the Overlord on the screen. And, notably, the Zur Eternal Schemer does not only just give them lifelink, it also gives them hexproof, the creatures that it targets. We're going to be leading off with a torch. That is a tough way to do it. But, presumably Andrew also has something like a Fiery Impulse to finish it off. But yeah, really just needs to find some land. So is able to pick up a Steam Vent. That'll help the juices keep flowing. So there's 6 in the graveyard. If you go Fiery Impulse, discard a card, and that could also line up a cruise here for Andrew. And it'll be the perfect number because the Fiery Impulse is going to be the 8th card, so you can cruise and keep the Phoenix in the graveyard.
Yep. And Andrew Elenbogen, like you said yesterday in his interview, said, I came to win the Pioneer event. I'm fine. My modern deck's doing good. Had a good top 16 finish, great finish, whatever. But said, I'm very confident about Phoenix. And at 4-0, looking pretty likely to have a good run if we can keep it up. But Casey Ryback's going to do what he can to stop it. As we are going to fatal push that Phoenix, the Overlord was revolted away.
Yeah, so now if you're looking, as far as Casey, what the follow-up is here, maybe something like a Zur Eternal Schemer could turn on the Spelunking. We're tapping 7 mana. That sounds like an Overlord to me.
Yep, Overlord of the Mistmoors coming down. The big white one, very much a Grave Titan-esque card, 6/6. It just makes 2/2/1 moths with flying. So, and does that every time it enters or attacks. So, if Andrew doesn't kill this Mistmoors next turn, Casey might just have an army of flyers.
Yeah, also a very important number here on the Overlord. Being a 6/6 means it's not going to die to a Lightning Axe. So Andrew is going to have to kind of pair 2 removal spells alongside each other. And starting off with a Consider, which means maybe he doesn't have the removal spell at the ready. But yeah, really needs to find a way to kill this, because if he doesn't kill this right now, it's just going to get even worse for him. It's going to make more 2/1s, and it's just going to kind of snowball out of control here for Casey.
Yep. Consider being resolved for Andrew. Getting another Consider, going to get that rummaging going. Immediately discards Artist Talent number 2. Knows he doesn't want that. Knows he has to answer this Overlord of the Mistmoors like you're talking about. And taking a second to think now. saw a bunch of cards, moved to a bunch of things, and this is why decks like Phoenix are so powerful. You see so much of your deck lets you play your game plan, but especially in the hands of accomplished players like Andrew Elenbogen, these strong players who know what's going on in the matchups, know what they have to play to. They're rewarded so much for playing these decks. But, even if you don't, there's just a lot of raw power in this deck. And we're seeing Lightning Axe as one of the kill spells here for Andrew, but awkward spot, has to use another Lightning Axe if things keep going.
Yeah, I think Andrew does have 2 red cards, but they're both Lightning Axes. So, not the best way to answer this Overlord. It's better than, letting Casey keep it in play. You do what you got to do. Yeah, so it looks like, first Lightning Axe is going to happen. I don't know if we picked up another red card.
Yeah.
So it looks like
it is going to be that second axe. I think that's what Andrew was hoping was, I have it covered, but if I can pick up a Fiery Impulse, I'll be very happy.
Yep.
And missed an Artist Talent trigger there for Andrew, or decided he didn't want to do it. I know he has Treasure Cruise as one of his 2 cards. That is a may, not a must. So, kind of wish it was a must, to be honest. Just 4-sheeted deck,
Not entirely sure what the other card is. Yeah, definitely also saw the Treasure Cruise. So we'll see how Casey wants to kind of move the battlefield from here. Looking at the deck list, we have the Overlords. Those kind of pair nicely with the Zers as far as the interaction is concerned. We've seen Fatal Push here. There's also Leyline Bindings, 2 Go for the Throats, 2 Vanishing Verses, and then a little spicy one-off here in the form of Flicker of Fate. That's a cool way to kind of reset the Overlords once you play them for their impending cost. And as we see, speaking of Overlords, this is one that we don't see a lot, the Overlord of the Flood Pits. But when you're playing something like Zur Eternal Schemer, you really just want to have the highest density of Overlords to kind of, have a bunch of ways to make those into creatures once you eventually find the Zur.
Yep. And we're going to see Casey play another Overlord Mistmores. Going to get that up the Beanstalk trigger. Going to keep churning through the deck. And this is what Casey's deck does. It just sort of presents constant threats, big cards, lots of card advantage. Andrew Elenbogen giving him tokens of himself. You see him smiling, very pleased with himself. And
hey, you need some tokens?
Yeah, no. Oh, they said me on them. Oh, I didn't realize.
Oh man, where did I get these from? It's just so happened that they happened to be in my deck box.
Yeah. And Angela is going to start with the Treasure Cruise here. Going to get some delving going on. Has more than enough. Probably just making sure we have Fiery Impulse online still, although we'll very easily turn that back online here. And it looks like we're probably not going to trigger the Artist Talent like the cards we have. Maybe doing a little double check to make sure there's not something that we need to be playing towards. But, all right, yep, just saying no on the Artist Talent. Take my 3 cards.
Yeah, now for Andrew here, this is kind of weird because you need to figure out a way to get through a lot of these tokens with the Phoenix, and it's kind of difficult to do that. Casey can just kind of trade a couple of times, then maybe the Phoenixes come back, but it's going to be hard for Andrew to kind of amass any sort of pressure through all these 2/1 flyers. So you look towards maybe a card like Prophetic Memory, where you can make 1 Phoenix big, but then in that case, then Casey could just start chump blocking. So I don't know. It's going to be really hard for Andrew to kind of amass enough of a battlefield to get through all these 2/1s.
Yep. Now, one thing that we saw at the RC, right, was some of these players on Andrew's team, System Magic, they decided to play Thassa's Oracle. And that gave them an oops, in this situation of well, you're accruing value. Who cares? I'm going to literally deck myself,
Yep.
Andrew ruthlessly has cut the Thassa's Oracle. And that means we're going to need to get a little cutthroaty here, and we're going to have to start killing some moths if we're going to win.
Right. Yeah, like I said, it's really hard to figure out a way to get through this. Is able to find a second Phoenix, can attack with 2 of those, can trade off for 2 of the Spirit tokens. The Moth tokens rather. So those get traded off. But Casey is kind of okay with that. Also, Casey just says, you know what? Take 6. Maybe can start racing with the 2/1s.
Yeah, that tells me Casey might have Zur plus Animate online.
Oh,
and he's just I'm attacking for a lethal next turn. You are not ready for this. And yeah, here's the Zur with 6 mana, which means we have a 7, a 5, and a 3 that are all going to be live. And there's 8 power from the Moths. So Andrew can kill the Zur, But no matter what, Casey's going to turn the creatures on. And if Andrew kills the Zur, it's going to be very hard to kill the other ones.
Yeah,
And
so
it's over. No, it's just done. He can't do it.
The nice thing, so Zur is interesting because you can kill the Zur to remove the lifelink from the creatures, but the really powerful thing and why this deck is so good is, or why Zur is such a good card for this deck, is that even if you remove the Zur, the creatures remain, or excuse me, the enchantments remain creatures even after the Zur is gone. It's not until end of turn. They just permanently become creatures. And that is a very, very important, because a lot of times with cards like this, you'll see, okay, well, maybe it's like, oh, well, they become a creature till end of turn. Later on, down the road, I can eventually, only get hit by them once. But even if Andrew can survive this combat phase, which seems kind of unlikely, is still going to have to deal with all of those creatures down the road. I guess if you remove the Zur, then you can Fiery Impulse the Blue Overlord, and that's an attack for 14.
Yeah, I was going to say, I imagine what's going to happen here is Andrew, well, it's a 5/5, so you can't Fiery Impulse it, right? Because it's power toughness.
Because it's power and toughness. Yeah. It doesn't just make it a creature. Right. Okay. Right.
Andrew literally can't win unless he had all his
right.
lightning axes. But even if he had all his lightning axes, then just the Overlord of the Mistwoods attacks, and Casey just decks you essentially by blocking with 2/1s. And you're seeing Andrew there. He also, very much like you, thought, oh, I can just kill the 5/3. No, Zur is a really weird and powerful card when you get to have the time to set it up. And we saw it there. So Andrew Elenbogen, Pro Tour champ, on the back foot. We're going to look at his sideboard again. Let's see if there's anything for this matchup. 2 Negate, 2 Mystical Dispute, 2 Brazen Borrower, 2 Annul, and then a Prismari Command, a Chandra's Defeat, a Lightning Axe, a Crackling Drake, a Narset, a Tormund Script, and a Props Enigma Memory. Devin, what do you like against this Beans deck?
I mean, it's tough. You got to find ways to remove the Zur. So the additional Lightning Axe probably has to come in, because you might want to swap the Fiery Impulses anyways, and you kind of just need the maximum number of ways to get Zur off the battlefield. The Narset is pretty good against Up the Beanstalk. Annul is somewhat decent against all of the Overlords. Well, not somewhat. It is very good against the Overlords, so probably wants to go towards those. Past that, maybe Brazen Borrowing a impending Overlord is not the best idea. Like it buys you a turn. Mystical Dispute, there are some blue cards in Casey's deck, the Blue Overlord and the Zur, so that might be a card you want to go towards. And then Negate is a weird one because it counters stuff like Beanstalk and Binding, but it doesn't actually counter the impending Overlords, even though you're casting them as non-creatures. They still count as creatures on the stack.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see Andrew, because we can see the players in our corner of our screens, and Andrew's got about 5 cards, but he's mixing them around. I'm going to be really curious to see exactly what he does. Narset and Brazen Bar are the only ones that jump out to me. I can see it going lots of different ways from there with some pretty bad cards in your main deck. Speaking of your deck, though, let's check out Casey Ryback's deck and see what is available over there, because I'm sure this deck thinks about Phoenix here in the sideboard. We have 3 Knockout Blows, 2 Dovin's Veto, 2 Heliod's Intervention, 2 Extinction Event, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Mystical Dispute, 1 Damping Sphere, and 1 Vanishing Verse. What do you like and why, Devin?
So from Casey's side of things, you definitely want to go to the Rest in Pieces to shut off the Treasure Cruises and the Arclight Phoenixes from coming back. Mystical Dispute is interesting. It can help fight over stuff like Prophetic Memory, the opposing counter spells from Andrew, as well as the Treasure Cruises. Vanishing Verse got a little bit better because now, obviously it could certainly kill Phoenix to begin with, but now you have a good 2-mana target in the form of Artist Talent. And in that same vein, maybe you want to go towards something like Heliod's Intervention just to be able to, for 3 mana, blow up a Artist Talent, although it is kind of expensive. So, definitely the Rest in Pieces, probably the Disputes, the Verse, but not sure about the Heliod's Interventions.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. One thing I'm noticing as we're talking here, Devin, is this deck, outside of its mana, basically a standard deck.
Yeah.
Like, it's Fatal Push, right? That's non-standard. The mana, that's not standard. The rest is kind of exciting to look at. Pretty cool. And I think this deck is very strong. I'm going to be interested to see how it develops here. And I mean, Casey at 5-0 looking pretty, 4-0 looking pretty good. Soon to maybe be 5-0. Let's cut down to our players as they are shuffling up. And yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting about this deck is just how good it is at playing kind of a normal game of Magic with having unnormal, unfair elements to it. Zur plus these Overlords are really messed up.
Right. And you know what's interesting about that game too? We kind of talked about during sideboarding how Elenbogen needs to have a removal spell for the Zur. Well, what about in a situation where where game one, where Casey just says, okay, I'm going to play a couple of Overlords. I'm not going to play the Zur until I have access to 7 or 9 mana, and then just say, okay, here's my Zur, activate 3 times. Even if you kill the Zur, I'm still just going to have lethal on the spot. So sometimes even the removal for Zur isn't even good enough. It's just if you're patient and you wait long enough to a spot where you can kind of activate it multiple times. This deck is really good. You mentioned standard. I have I don't know if we want to get on a standard tangent, but I have played a little bit with a shell like this in standard, and it is quite powerful.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I imagine the mana, you don't have the triumphs to make things
Mana's
work,
rough.
yeah, but also, you can do different stuff. You don't have to be exactly this deck. It's pretty interesting to see. And speaking of making the mana work, Casey Ryback has Mana Confluence. Whenever I see that, I think, oof. Oof.
Especially on turn 1,
Yeah, that's I don't know. Artist talent past the turn. How many of those are in the deck? I didn't even notice them before.
1 Mana Confluence.
The Miser's Confluence, eh?
Had it, by the way.
Had it. Vanishing Verse, take it down.
Yeah, I love that. So we did see the I guess there was 2 in the main deck and 1 in the board. So I mean, we presumably the third probably did come in.
I'm looking at the mana closer now. I'm brain melting. We scienced the 1 Mana Confluence, but the 3 Zagoth Triumph, 2 of the rest.
Oh, yeah.
You know what? I'm in the commentary booth. As Cavender Souls comes down, it's not my job to judge these things. Overlord of the Hauntwoods coming in, making an everywhere token. I mean, everything's fine.
You yourself did play an interesting version of Enigmatic in DC with a slightly different mana base. So
yeah, but I didn't have Mana Confluence.
True.
That's me. I did play basically 5-color Enigmatic. So I'm not saying I'm down against that. I'm just down against Mana Confluence. When I see Mana Confluence, I think to myself, really? Every time.
You really just refuse to play the Confluence, huh?
It's so bad.
It's not great.
I like Mana Confluence if you're a deck like Boggles, where you're like, I'm playing a short game, my mana's atrocious, and I just will kill you as long as I cast my spells. That's the biggest hurdle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in this kind of deck, I'm a little against it. That's fine, though. We see Artist Talent come down.
5 mana, that could be Zur plus activate. We'll see if Casey wants to go for that. Casey definitely maybe was patient a little bit in game 1. I'm not sure if he drew the Zur the 1 turn that he activated it, but at least waited a little bit. And what's interesting to me about this is the Cavern of Souls, where you're kind of put your opponent in a squeeze, where if you name Avatar, you have 12 good uncounterable cards to cast through that. As we see the Elenbogen token come back up.
Yeah. And yeah, it's a great point there on Cavern, just also like fixing your mana. And then, like in the late game, you only your mana is typically fixed by then. So then you get to name, Wizard or whatever for Zur. And then now suddenly it's coming down, doesn't get disputed or whatever. And Andrew's sitting on, these cards that can't really do that much. Also, the weird thing about these things are, even if we didn't have Cavern of Souls, Negate can't answer them, right? Like they're still creatures. So it's a very weird interaction. Now, obviously, I think Negate's still good here for Andrew for various reasons, but it's interesting to think about. Is we are going to see Lightning Axe trigger the Artist Talent, discard Artist Talent, and get a use on the Moth. We're going to get a Phoenix in the graveyard, so that explains why it was worth. Now, we drew another Phoenix, but our hand is Counterspell, Treasure Cruise, Phoenix, and I don't think we can get back the Phoenix this turn.
No, because I think there is 6 total cards in the graveyard, including the Phoenix that Elenbogen discarded. So probably doesn't want to get rid of that one. Even if you wanted to, 2 mana for a cruise, that's the whole graveyard. But then the Phoenix is gone, so can't really do that. I mean, can hold up the counter spells, but again, if Casey just goes, say, here's a Zur, animate my Overlord, what is Andrew supposed to do about that?
Yeah, it's tough. Elenbogen's going to need to be ruthless here and figure out what the line is. He's tanking on it.
Yeah, he is gonna exile the Phoenix and fire off the cruise. I mean, kind of makes sense. Or maybe we miscounted the cards in graveyard. Okay, there is 1 extra. I thought I counted 6, but it is 7. So he is able to keep the Phoenix in the graveyard. Okay.
But Mystical Dispute, Mana Confluence, clutch. What was I talking about? It could be anything. As we are going to see a Steam Vince here shocked in afterwards.
And the Steam Vince is so brutal because if he had it in his hand before, he could have held up his own dispute to fight over Casey's.
Yeah, and now Casey Ryback can play something like Zur this turn. Elenbogen can dispute in order to tap down and not get hit, but if there's a Zur coming down, this could be massive. But it looks like Casey actually just doesn't have much going on and wants to keep the Moth back on defense, and I like that. Sort of, hey, I've got these unbeatable overlords coming down, and it's going to be an issue for you eventually. Of note, you might be wondering why they're on the same counter. Casey just missed a trigger on Overlord to the Hauntwood, so now we're synced up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we just missed a turn one. A little oopsie poopsie. It happens. Everywhere token in the lands there, first of its kind. Little figuring out what we're going to do here as Casey's deck has impressed. And Nassif was streaming this deck earlier today with the stream title Best Deck and Pioneer. And I know content creators would never bait me with stream titles.
No, I would. Yeah, we would never do that.
Yeah, I don't even know why he said you there for a second. I was talking, yeah. But here we go. Overlord of the Hauntwoods, hard cast from hand. That one is not the Overlord Andrew was wanting to see. Even if it was, can't do much about them with the Cavern of Souls. And next turn, Andrew is going to be getting hit for a lot. And then the following turn, hit for a ton.
Yeah, and that's even assuming Casey doesn't have the Zur. You can imagine Zur next turn, cast Zur, tap 4 mana, animate both of these, hit you for, what's that? I can't count that high. 7, 13, 19, 21.
That's a lot. We're also going to see just how powerful Artist Talent is. We leveled up the first one. Everything's going to be cheaper. And now we're going to start burning through our deck.
Yeah, and it looks like the Annul did come in. So that was a card that was discarded there for Andrew. Resolving the Picklock, finds another Cruise. That could be a start because there are 2 Phoenixes in the graveyard. So 4 cards. I believe it's, 6 total. So the Cruise goes to hand. Then that's going to be 9, which is 7 minus the 2 Phoenixes. So, Elenbogen will be able to set that up.
Yep. And this is a really big spot for Elenbogen here. We sort of need things to work out this turn because we're going to just plow through our deck, and Casey has had time to set up and will have real threats in just one more turn. Mm-hmm. Casey also has a Leyline Binding, and it looks like he's been waiting and it's going to catch potentially the Artist Talent here once Andrews taps super low. And yeah, those negates and things are gone. Casey knew Andrew had a bunch of counter spells, wasn't doing anything. Great play there from Ryback.
Yeah, I wanted to wait until Andrew maybe tapped a little bit lower because, discarding Annul, discarding negate kind of has to assume there's something going on over there. Now, the question is, what is the follow-up? I think I saw a Lightning Axe and a Spell Pierce were the pickups for Elenbogen off of that Cruise. Mm-hmm. So could potentially Lightning Axe the Moth token to get the Phoenix was into play. Because I think we're only on 2 spells, right? The Picklock and the Cruise? Or maybe
because we played Talent. Was the first thing. The second Talent. So that meant, we
might have missed it. We might have missed a removal spell.
Well, we started the turn with Talent. I think we should get a judge involved ASAP.
Yeah, because I thought, it was Talent plus Cruise plus Prankster, right?
Yeah, and there's only 3 mana. Yeah. I mean, it's possible we missed something. Devin and I have been wrong before. I'm wrong about this mana confluence right now. It's crushing it, but we're seeing a lot going on here, and it's important to catch. And also, thank God Elenbogen's tanking, because now we get to think a bit more about it. This is gonna
you're right, no, because he led on the Artist Talent, then the Cantrip, then the Cruise. So maybe if we can have a judge just head over there real quick, just so we can get a double check to make sure there's nothing we're missing.
Yep, and I saw a judge walking over, although it looks like to be the other match. Oh no! Coverage guy, get up, leave us. We can do it. Run over there.
Go.
Coach chat won't shut up if I don't do it. Please. They're just going to talk to me about stuff all match. I don't want to do it. It's my last match of the year. We're going to see a cycle of the Triumph. There's still time to back up. No information was gained. Anyways, it happens if it happens. One of the weird things about coverage, right, is we get to see these things where normally they just happen in the Swiss and we don't catch them.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly. Get to see them live.
This is the thing I tell Twitch chat all the time is they're very judgmental. And I'm like, surely if I watched your games, I would never catch anything. Surely.
Surely. You would never.
We are going to see an everywhere token tap. That is what that blank one is. We have 1 everywhere. We're going to see a Leyline Binding cast. And I like this from Ryback. He's just like, hey, you've shown me a lot of things that could stop my leyline bindings. I'm going to just get in this binding and call it a day.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would have to imagine at this point, even if, like I said, it's possible there was something that we missed. But even at this point, probably we're at the point of no return. We will have to see exactly. But yeah, the Overlord's now coming into play. Now Casey has a ton of pressure on the battlefield here. And yeah, Andrew just not really having a lot over. Mason, you're laughing. What are you laughing at?
I'm Twitch chat. I'm doing everything I can for you. I know our feature match judge is my neighbor, so I DM'd him on Facebook and I said judge,
okay.
all caps. And I was just laughing because I thought I was funny. But now you made me say it out loud. As we're going to see Crackling Drake come down. There's the you see the message. All right. Well, I think what's going to happen is way too much has happened.
Yeah, way too much. Even if, like I said, even if that is the case, and what we presume happened the turn before was that Andrew only cast 2 spells. I mean, we're 2 turns ahead at this point. There's no turning back. So we are past the point of no return, as one would say.
Yeah. I assume it's a GRV. So basically the judges are messaging, because basically we got the message across. So now we're relaying basically what we think happened. Once again, maybe we're wrong, whatever. We just don't want Twitch chat mad. That's fine. And this is just a silly oopsie poopsie. I think Andrew even cast a spell later in the turn. So like he could have done it then. Obviously it's a little advantageous. Basically we just need to get a GRV, call it a day, right? That's just what's going to happen.
Yeah, because at least from what we saw, he started the turn, with the talent in play that was leveled up, cast the second talent using 1 mana, cast the pick to free the Fae using the second mana, then cast the Cruise with the 3rd mana. Then when he went to combat to get the Phoenixes back, there was a total of 3 mana tapped, presumably for the talent, the Cruise, and the Picklock, which that is an enchantment and 2 instant sorcery. So that's at least what we think happened. Not entirely sure. Again, we might be missing something, as we've been known to do that, but
a lot of this is just we want to make sure the game stays clean and clear. We understand, it's a weird thing, right? Like feature matches basically get extra sets of eyes, but we're only supposed to really comment on these sort of things. So, and once again, we potentially missed something. I believe that fully did not be the case. Normally, I would not be so like, let's get a judge going unless I'm like 99.9% sure. That's kind of my default, is to assume I've missed something because I'm working a job here. I'm messaging production. They're talking to my ear. Things happen. It's okay. It is not the end of the world. In the worlds of Hannah Montana, every mistakes, everybody has those days. It's not that big a deal. I sincerely believe there's no ill intent here. Andrew Elenbogen is a very accomplished player, done a lot of things, and has, I see always play very well and very cleanly. I think this is just what we would call a small oopsie poopsie. Now, the problem is we have caught, the judges got involved, are having to relay across the country to them. Too much has happened to rewind. That is
for
problem.
Sure. Yeah, there's no way we can back up at this point. I mean, there's basically been like a two whole full turn cycle since that turn. Just been too many things cast. Now, as far as the battlefield currently sits, I mean, there's a big Crackling Drake. Casey's got the couple of Overlords in play. Andrew only access to 1 mana available. Maybe something like a Lightning Axe could kill the Green Overlord. But the Mistmoors could give us some chump blockers to potentially block the Drake next turn. Maybe Casey also has something like a Leyline Binding, but we will have to see exactly how this plays out.
Yeah. And, from this spot, it's a pretty interesting game state, right? Like this Crackling Drake is a bajillion a million big, right? So if we can get it across the finish line, we're going to be good. And I think what's happening here is Andrew just finished telling the judge about his turn and is apologizing for, the game state / if we're wrong, sorry for us. Thank you, Andrew, for passing that along. But yeah, I think what's going to end up happening here is just, we're going to move on, call it a day. It might also just be a situation where I could easily imagine playing this deck and you're doing all these things, right? You felt like you cast the spells. You're also discarding so many spells to the artist talents that it just feels like you've cast them. And, obviously, once again, I think that's where we were. But
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, the Phoenix deck takes so many game actions in a given turn. Like, you cast a couple of spells, but in the meantime, like you said, you're looting, and maybe you discard a cantrip, and then you look at your graveyard, and you're like, oh, I see the cantrip, the cruise, and whatever, and you're like, okay, well, I've cast 3 spells now.
yeah,
But yeah.
yeah, and I'll just say it in chat. I think it's like very, very likely here that Andrew just made a mistake. Once
Hmm.
again, it's impossible to know, right? Like there has been accusations in the past. I'm not accusing Andrew of this, but we've seen people who got the benefit of the doubt. My whole case is that Andrew normally plays incredibly tight, and I have watched him call things on himself and catch himself when he doesn't know people are watching. And I think it's just a very simple situation of these mistakes happen. And the reason you see more of them chat from PT champs is because we feature PT champs because they're really good at Magic and they make mistakes because they're people. So you're
Right.
like, oh, I always see this happen with so and so, where like it happens with these people that do really well all the time. And it's like, no, this is happening across the whole hall. That's why we need judges. And we just show you the matches with the good players so you see the good players do it. It is not that big a deal,
Mm.
you know?
I agree.
Yeah. So just,
See, Andrew Wolthius walking by. I wanted to see. I don't know. We got some things to talk about. Andrew Wolthius was, I believe, going into this round at table 1 with the Demir Ninjas deck. So he's a bit on a tear with some Ornithopters, Mason.
yeah, I like that deck a lot. I'm gonna be honest. After
Same.
this, my plan, I'm going to the gym. I like to play a little arena on my phone while I start off on the treadmill, and I've got it saved on the other monitor. I'm ready to queue it up on arena, and it looks like we're gonna continue play from here. Um, Everything should be taken care of, and we're gonna get some Andrew Moths onto the battlefield and attack for I think 11. That's a
Yep.
or 12. That's a lot of damage.
Yeah, presenting Andrew the option of blocking, which Andrew doesn't really want to do because he
Mm-hmm.
needs that crackling drake to be able to cross the finish line. And yeah, this is a situation where a lot of times what happens in Phoenix is because you see so many cards, you have to figure out what is left in my deck. Like, how many removal spells do I have left? How many ways do I have to remove these blockers? Because if it's a situation where Andrew, has enough removal spells left over, maybe he says, okay, I'll take the hit, try to find the 2 removal spells to remove the blockers, and then just have the Crackling Drake for lethal.
Yeah. And when we were looking at the like mini camera during sideboarding, I saw Andrew flicking a couple fiery impulses, and it makes sense, right? They're not
Yep.
super good. So maybe he has one in an attempt to combine to kill one of these white overlords, right? But that probably means these moths are going to basically be trading the entire game. And I think, one of the weird things about this deck now that it's changed, right, is you just Hall the Storm Giants is just not a part of Andrew's deck anymore because
Hmm.
he loots away the land so much, right? It used to be Phoenix, I would joke, is it Hall the Storm Giants? Where you technically just you theoretically you want the other cards, but you would always just make your land drop because you drew so many cards. You'd keep
Yep.
like 1 or 2 for Shredder, and then eventually you just get to these points and you go like kill spell, Hall, you're dead. Or like time walk, copy at Hall, you're dead. That's not how the deck's built anymore, and you lose a little bit of that insurance. Now I think Artist Talent's worth giving that up, but it is like a pretty big change up here, and Andrew's gonna have to figure out how to get across. He does have Picklock Plankster, which he can play, which can help chump a little bit, maybe get a profs. But Devin, what are you seeing to get out of here with?
I mean, on 12 life, he's also facing down a ton of pressure here. Still has the Green Overlord plus the 2 Moths to contend with.
Mhm.
So, and I don't exactly know how many axes we've been through, but I can't imagine there's a lot left. I want to say we've gone through at least 3. So maybe if he boarded in the 4th from the sideboard, maybe has 1 left in his deck list to be able to answer that Overlord. Only 1 Phoenix in the graveyard because 1 got exiled from the binding. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of what we talked about, where Andrew really needs to find a way. Maybe, is there potentially a way to set up a lethal attack over the course of a couple of turns? If you send 1 Phoenix in, you block with the other one, but it's going to be a dispute on that Free the Fae from Casey.
I like that from Casey. Fighting over the ways that Andrew can get back in this. You have a good board presence. Just do what you can. It looks like we're rummaging. And now
Yeah,
if
there
Andrew played
are
again.
we talked a little bit about this before. There are no copies of Thassa's Oracle in Andrew's deck list. So, if Casey has this sort of battlefield, that is not something that Andrew can draw towards. He is choosing not to play the Thassa's Oracle this weekend. Instead, just go back and look at the deck list. There is the 2 Ledger Shredders, 1 Borrower, 1 Props, 1 Torch. So those are kind of like the flex spots that Elenbogen has chosen to go with. So not something that we can go towards if you are Elenbogen's side.
I think Elenbogen was just declaring how many spells have been cast there, and both players, you see, kind of chuckle, be like, "I have done it. 3 have been cast,
Confirmed."
Yeah, and we're gonna get back these Phoenixes and hope that they can, go the distance here. We're also seeing, Casey's deck is very impressive, right? It's put up a lot of good results. The difference between Bean and no Bean is this game was close. In game 1, it was like kind of close, but like not really. And
not
that
really.
is the big difference, right? Is like Casey just had that flow of cards, knew was going to hit the Zur and just get that huge swing. And just also knows, enough kill spells, I can kill the Phoenixes when they get profed,
Right.
So big difference here post board. And now we're seeing Casey can attack with this Overlord of the Hauntwoods, can get an everywhere token and force Andrew to, cast enough spells to bring it back. Might just have to, because
one thing that we Oh, never mind. Okay, I was gonna say I'm so used to these enchantments decks playing Yorion that I thought that Casey was a Yorion deck, but no, only 60 cards, so no Yorions today. I was wondering, but yeah, my bad. In any case, yeah, Casey has also not found the Zur yet. That is one card that you can imagine if that is able to be located, that turns on both bindings. But yeah, we're gonna attack with everything. So Andrew has the option of double blocking. I think I like this from Andrew. Get the Overlord off the battlefield. That'll deal 4 damage down to Andrew. But yeah, you bring up a very good point where the games where Casey doesn't have Beanstalk, he can kind of run out of steam a little bit, and that's sort of exactly what we're seeing. And Casey unable to find a Zur here, that would probably almost certainly end the game on the spot.
Yeah, and what I like there at Casey's attack too is Casey felt like Andrew was probably going to block, so he gets him with the Moss because he knows there's no way he can get profed. And we actually see Prof get discard there by Andrew.
Wow.
And which makes me think Andrew's deck is smaller than it looks, and he doesn't think he can actually get the pick lock big enough, quick enough.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the library, there does not appear to be a lot of cards left in Andrew's library.
Yeah. And yeah, you see Andrew's count. Yeah. And that was a quick count.
The 10 to 12 range, maybe?
I agree. And that means Artist Talent's starting to come back. Okay, we had the other profs. That makes sense. We are going to get the card draw going here, and we are going to play the pick lock pranks or something. Something's going to come onto the battlefield because, once again, your Phoenixes cannot be targeted by your profs, as we learned in an earlier round. Now, the real question is, can Casey chump block and kill spell enough? Casey's on double lands in hand. Could draw something like Overlord of the Flood Pit, which also draws cards.
Yeah, I think Andrew's not 100% positive if he drew a card off the profs. I believe he didn't, because I saw him rummage discard the vents, but I don't think he actually drew a card off of the profs yet.
Okay, well, luckily it looks like both players just confirmed deck size, and so Andrew's like, okay, well, I was supposed to have drawn 2 cards. My deck is whatever the size is, so I now know. So look at a little heads up there, and that also is going to help us confirm sort of how many cards have been drawn for the profs to make sure we're on the right number. So
the other thing worth noting is the spell count, right? So we've cast the Cruise and the Prof so far, so only on 1 spell. And Andrew does kind of want to deploy one of the pick locks this turn, because otherwise you're not going to have a creature in play to get the counters on for the profs. So presumably 2 mana to spend on the pick lock. Do we have 2 more spells left to get the Phoenixes back? I'm not sure that we do.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we do. And also, Andrew might have something like negate in hand, right? And if he has one of his negates, he discards some of them. But if he has them, he's going to want to keep it to make sure that the profs doesn't get fought over. Something like Vanishing Verse could have been game over here if, before move to combat, I Vanishing Verse your profs. Andrew probably just couldn't win in time. Just not enough cards in deck. Now, Casey has a Triome in hand. He's going to hold it.
I don't know if was there a Triome? I thought it might have been 2 Shocks.
I think it's Hollowed Fountain and then Naya Triome.
Okay.
We'll
So
have
yeah,
to see.
borrower bouncing one of the tokens, depending on how many cards Andrew can flow through while removing both blockers. So this is probably just lethal, right? 6, 7, even if with the props, so it's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 plus the 3 Phoenixes. Now that's 19, I believe, for Andrew.
Yep. I guess it wasn't a Triumph. That's my bad. I thought it was. I imagined Casey would probably cycle and try and find something there. But, like we mentioned, the flood out can occur, right? Like with Casey's deck, sometimes you have a lot of really powerful, high impact cards, but you don't have a lot of card selection, right? Like one of the nice things about Elenbogen's deck is just how much it smooths the curve, how much it never really fails, right? It has such a low fail rate. Casey's deck hits up the beanstalk, very similar position, not as good as Elenbogen at doing it, but when you don't have that, you don't have, your blue overlord to help sift your draws. You're kind of just like almost like Seth Banfield's Worlds deck, right? Like a ramp deck with kill spells. And you're just kind of like, yeah, I draw what I draw, right? Like,
Mason, are you a ramp hater?
no, I actually play a lot of ramp decks. I really like ramp.
Oh, okay.
I think ramp's underplayed.
Yeah, but I think that these first 2 games are a very, very good showcase of exactly what you mentioned, where, game 1, we saw Casey kind of run away with the game, just had a turn 2 beanstalk, was drawing an extra card every turn, was able to find, all of the overlords just in time, found the Zur at the right moment. And then game 2, Elenbogen was able to cycle through, make sure he hits the very specific cards he needs at a lot of given points, ended up waiting towards the very end of the game where he had less than 10 cards in his library to find that profs, or maybe he had it for a while, just waited to set up a little bit. And maybe perhaps this game we'll see Casey with a turn 2 beanstalk. Maybe perhaps both players can sort of fight on all cylinders. As far as the matchup is concerned, it seems like it's very, very close. I wanted to say I was going to give a little bit of a slight edge to Casey, but I actually think Elenbogen improves a little bit better in the post-board games.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I would lean towards slightly Elenbogen, but I think it's still going to be a close matchup for game 3.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah, I agree. I think what I like about Elenbogen's deck is just the fail rate is so much lower, but I do think Casey's deck lines up pretty well here. And so I feel like it's whoever's on the play is who I like more. Although I think, over 1,000 games, I like Elenbogen a bit more. So it's really interesting, right? Like just Elenbogen's deck's going to stumble way less than Casey's, but Casey overpowers him. I'm going to vote Casey though. I like these enchantments. It's going to be sick. We'll have to see how it goes. We actually just saw the enigmatic deck. This is the Yorion version. Obviously, this is not enigmatic, but it won the Chinese RC. So, congrats to that player. And this archetype has a lot of room, right? Like this deck and enigmatic are kind of like siblings. They're different, but, they end up doing a lot of similar stuff. So it's going to be cool to see them evolve.
Yeah, and I remember seeing some posts, I believe it was from Dom Harvey, who played a slightly different version of this Overlord deck, where he actually went up to 80 cards and kind of mixed in all of the maximum number of Overlords, but kind of also mixed in the enigmatic package. So, as you mentioned, tons of different ways to build this, where the other thing about 80 cards is Yorion works well with the Overlords. We see a shock here on turn 2 for Casey, and I believe that might have been a pass. I think Casey did not find a third land drop here. That's tough.
That's really tough. Casey does not want to stumble against Elenbogen. We talked about it, right? Like he's doing some more card per, like if we cast equal number of cards, right? Like mine are better. But obviously Elenbogen doesn't play that kind of game. And when you sort of miss here, you're potentially falling really far behind. That makes me think Casey has some really high impact sideboard cards in his hand that made him want to keep this. And then you see Elenbogen sort of just, pass the turn, not really wanting to play into anything, knowing Casey has cards he wants to deploy. And now he has to decide, am I going to do something like Overlord of the Hauntwoods here, make my land drop, and potentially get annulled? Looks like it's going to be Spelunking.
Yeah, that one also a reasonable annul target.
Yeah, it's super interesting too, right? Because Casey doesn't have the land or has the weirdest bluff of all time where he missed a land drop to then set up Spelunking. But, it's just going to let the mana enter untapped. And if Andrew has something like, yeah, free the Fae, this is a great time to deploy it. And sort of, Andrew stole the playback, right?
Right. Yep.
And we're going to see Opt be the take here. Doesn't want negate. And it's going to cast the Opt right away.
All right. So that is going to, Andrew's going to cast the opt, and we'll have to see as we throw it back to Andrew's turn. Couldn't quite get a good look at the hands for Andrew or either player for that matter. But yeah, no Phoenixes. Not exactly sure where we want to go here. Looks like deploying a Mount Land.
And the Fae are freed yet again.
Mm-hmm. Finds an axe or a consider. Chose the axe, which is interesting. Maybe worried about something like potentially like if Casey, I'm trying to think like if Casey made, like you said, baiting with the spelunking, maybe he still has a copy of the Green Overlord, and then if that were to happen, maybe he's worried about a Xur after the fact.
Yeah, I think Andrew is also like very heads up, and like the fact that Casey thought about the spelunking, it could be that he had some sideboard card, right? And he was thinking about leaving the man up versus not. But I think it's more like, am I playing the spelunking as bait or not? And yeah, Casey plays the Overlord of the Hauntwoods. It gets annulled, and now Andrew sort of has the green light to play anything he wants, and it's Crackling Drake. So if Casey doesn't have a kill spell for that, it could be game over. That Crackling Drake's probably about 7 or 8 power right now.
I would have to imagine it's got to be close to that. We're doing a count here. It's got to be
also
close.
worth noting, if Andrew has like a null here, so it looks like it's 5. If Andrew has a null, then something like Leyline Binding, which is one of Casey's better answers, just won't do anything here. So Casey's going to need, one of his like go for the throats, which maybe didn't even stay in. Right.
Yeah, notably the Vanishing Verses. We said that was going to come in from the sideboard to answer talent. That one does not take care of the Crackling Drake.
Yep. Casey hit the land now. Looks like we're going to play the White Overlord.
Ooh, do we have the second annul? Does not have the second. That would have been brutal.
Yeah, that might have been game over had that resolved. Excuse me, stop this from resolving. Now we're going to have 2 Moths, and they're going to get us to chump block a little bit. But we saw last game how Andrew can very easily clear the way one time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if he wants to, he can probably go the distance. And he has an axe in hand, and it looks like he's actually axing right now. Nope, he's going to wait. Never mind. Decides against it. Might be hoping to draw Artist Talent or some Phoenixes, and looks like we're going to start with a Treasure Cruise.
We're going cruising, Mason.
Yup.
Maybe he can find something like a profs off of this. And then that would be, 4 power on that, get it up to 6. Then it would be a 10 power attacker. That would be a 2-turn clock.
Yeah, plus if you profs into like Lightning Axe here, you might be able to actually just lethal. Like, just actually clear the way. We'll have to see, though. Sleight of hand. Really love all the cantrips and decisions.
Yeah, and remember, each one of these spells is continuing to pump up the Drake as well. So the more cantrips he finds, the more we can power up the Drake. Now, it is worth noting that even though there's 7 dice on it, it still has 4 toughness, which means, Casey still does have the opportunity to double block, but looks like Elenbogen is not going to give him that opportunity.
Yep, and discarding the Phoenixes with that, oh my goodness. This is 9-15 damage.
2 Phoenixes, right? Yes, this is going to be 15.
Yeah, if we have a 3rd Phoenix, it's lethal. If Andrew has something like Free the Fae here, he could cast it and has lots of ways to win. Could hit another Phoenix, could hit 3 spells and choose nothing, right? Just very much has a chance to win here. Looks like he does have something he could potentially cast. I think he's just thinking, okay, can I actually assign lethal? Decides cannot, and it's going to put Casey down to 3, which honestly I think is good enough. A lot about Casey's stuff is like he's on the play, consistently doing his thing, and curving out and like stalling for time, basically. If you had a Xur here, it'd be good, but it wouldn't be game winning, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this was really tough for Casey. I'm not exactly sure what the texture of the hand that he decided to keep. We did keep a 2-lander. Perhaps had some sort of the counter spells. But there are 2 Mystical Disputes and 2 Dovin's Vetoes in the sideboard here for Casey. So perhaps maybe went towards some of those, and that's what we kept the hand on the strength of those. But I mean, it's really tough, and possible that we just had, 2 land and a couple Overlord of the Haunt Woods. Maybe wanted to, hopefully draw land 3, hit that, cast, get some land drops there. But, with Casey stumbling here and no Beanstalk, it's going to be pretty. Maybe I spoke too soon.
Yeah, I mean, Extinction Event is the only card I can see that does anything here. They're named even, and
Wow,
Andrew can
he
hard
didn't have a
cast the Phoenix to
counterspell.
win. Will he draw it? He has a lot of really live draws here. And Casey has the Zur in hand. If Andrew doesn't kill this turn and Casey can draw the land, get the Zur on the battlefield, turn the Mistborn lifelinking, he's going to swing it. Now, a lot needs to go wrong for Andrew here, but it's already started going wrong. Why would it stop now?
This is crazy. I can't believe he actually had the Extinction Event to clear the board, and now, Elenbogen, so he can play the Talent, but even if we cast a couple of cantrips, okay, 2 mana for a Cruise, but now we don't have enough to hard cast the Phoenix, so now it would have to be
triple
cantrip.
Spell.
Yeah, cantrip, discard Phoenix, and then second cantrip to go to get it back, because that would be the third spell with the Cruise.
I think he's in the tank. He's thinking about what he wants to do. He might have found some sort of interaction spell that he wants to leave up for Zur, right? Like he might be thinking, okay, I don't think I can actually get there now. I'm going to, think about what I'm doing and just maybe hold up Zur so I don't get life-linked. But also might be thinking about what are the odds are. I think those are the only 2 Phoenixes we've seen so far. I don't think any got exiled earlier. This game is kind of, not much going on from Casey's side. And we are going to see a Spiral for the passing of the turn.
Untapped land is big here for Casey, because then we would gain 6, go up to 9, and make 2 blockers for the Phoenixes.
Yeah, and Elenbogen will be behind. But either way, Casey now has cards like Vanishing Verse up.
I say untapped land. There's a Spelunking in place, so they're all untapped. Yep. Okay,
yes.
There we go.
Yeah, and the Triumph's there. And we're seeing Casey go for it. Here comes 3. Oh, he has a bunch of Zurs in hand.
Do we have 2 white sources? Oh, yeah, there's the Rafine's Tower. Okay, Rafine's Tower plus Sparas.
All right, so we're going to see Mystical Dispute. That's going to allow us a rummage. Now, of note, Casey does have a Vanishing Verse in hand. So that's going to mean that Elenbogen's Phoenix might not kill.
Yeah,
obviously
there
it could be protected.
Another Zur left over. I can't quite get a good look at the hand here for Casey.
I think it was Zur, Vanishing Verse, random spell.
I don't know why, but I thought I maybe saw a veto. But yeah, Vanishing Verse is nice, because even if Elenbogen can put the Phoenix into play, that you could still hold up the Vanishing Verse for the Phoenix to buy you that 1 extra turn, because that's really all Casey needs at this point, is just 1 more draw step to get to that Zur.
Yep, and we're going to free the Fae here, rummage away the Artist Talent, hit some cantrips, can take the Consider. It looks like Overlord of the Haunt Woods, Leyline Binding, Vanishing Verse, Zur, and maybe the Flood Pits. Maybe I was wrong on the 3rd Zur there. Consider, going to happen here. Discard the island. Now, part of this is, Elenbogen has cards like Mystical Dispute, so even if we find the Phoenix, we might be able to, protect it. Obviously, Mystical Dispute, very hard to use against Vanishing Verse, but is doable. And it looks like Elenbogen is just going to try and get this Picklock Prankster in play and ride it to victory.
Yeah, the Prankster is interesting too, because Elenbogen may also have a copy of Prosthetic Memory to maybe grow the Picklock next turn. So even if he can't find a Phoenix, that also might still be able to present a lethal threat. So we'll see if Casey finds... Now, even if Casey does find land 6, Elenbogen, if there is a second Mystical Dispute, probably still fires it off, because if you pay the 3, then you can't animate the Overlord this turn.
Yeah. Now, Casey does have Leyline Binding, so if, the Mystical Dispute happens, he might not even fight over it. It looks like he's actually going for the Drowner.
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
So I wonder if Casey is maybe saying, instead of going for the Zur this turn, he's going to go for the Overlord this turn, the other Overlord this turn, and then next turn holding up, some sort of interaction, whether it's Binding or Vanishing Verse if he has that, and then the next turn go for, and yeah, this is the bait for Mystical Dispute.
Yeah. So now Casey has Zur in hand, has another one, and has a Leyline Binding. So next turn we can play it. Of note, it just gives hexproof and lifelink to enchantment creatures. Yep. So it will just automatically be helping that creature out. if we get that far. And currently, Elenbogen is not presenting a lethal attack. Has the ability to easily do it, but
Yeah, and also worth noting that Casey has the ability to pay for spell pierce. So if Elenbogen has some sort of like, cheap if Elenbogen has one of those soft counter magics, if looking at the deck list, I mean, I'm trying to think of what other counter spells he could have. There's 2 negates, 2 disputes, 2 annuls. I think we've already seen both annuls and both disputes. So I think negate is the only one that could even fight over the leyline binding, I believe.
yeah. And he is pretty light on mana. And because Casey fought over the artist talent, it's going to be harder to get the Phoenix in the graveyard. Unless, you do something like Lightning Axe to discard the Phoenix and just put the damage on the Overlord, which is what Elenbogen's doing.
Ooh, there's the Phoenix.
He's setting up. If he has a negate, this is going to be all she wrote. As Prophetic Memory is going to also put him in the squeeze of 2 lethal threats. Now, we have 2 minutes left in the round. These players do have an extension because of our judge call. Brazen Bar is going to bounce the Overlord.
That's spell number 3.
Yeah, and spell number 3 with 2 cards drawn means we have 2 lethal attackers. Casey can't get out of it. Congratulations, Andrew Elenbogen. Moving on to 5-0. Both players very live for our top 8 still here today. But Elenbogen, a little above the rest at 5-0, has told us yesterday he's going to win the tournament, Devin. He's trying.
So far, he's not lying, right? I mean, he was really confident in this Artist Talent Phoenix deck. And as we've seen him on camera a couple of times, I think it's pretty clear as to why.
Yep. And like we just mentioned there was 2 minutes left in the round, so we're not going to have any backup magic this round. But Drake's Astro, Corbin Hostler, they're going to take you home for the rest of today and for the rest of our series year from this. We'll see you all in December the 14th and the 15th for the Invitational, so make sure to follow. And I've had a blast commentating this year. I've had a blast doing it with you, Devin. I hope we get to do it more next year, and I hope you all enjoyed the commentary. Stick around for some more Paper Magic. We'll be back.